Mainly the co-crystal role of co-crystals from a crystal engineering perspective. Today morning we heard Professor Nangia talking on this pharmaceutical co-crystals and its possible applications. So I'll try to actually in this talk, I'll try to connect some of my research which I had done in Professor Desiraj group and Professor Meyerson group and try to connect them with the industrial perspective towards it. So the first question, whether this co-crystal in pharmaceutical industry, what is the recent status now? So we can comfortably say that it has arrived. So I have taken one this plot from Professor Zarotko's review in Drug Discovery Today, which was published in 2019. And it shows sharp increase in publications as well as patents related to pharmaceutical co-crystals. So black bars represent publications and white bars represent the patents. So it shows that it's clearly increasing over the years, and now we have at least 4 approved co-crystals of A2-glyphosine, ipragliflozin, and then Entresto and tramadol HCl celecoxib co-crystal. And interesting is that last 2 are drug-drug co-crystals. And even what illustrates the importance of this pharmaceutical co-crystals or co-crystal in pharmaceutical space is the case of A2-glyphosine, where the main compound was amorphous, but once this co-crystal has been made and it has been approved. So co-crystal offers many opportunities. First of all, it exists as a stable crystalline form. It helps in enhancement of many physicochemical properties, and it doesn't alter the pharmacological property which API is known for. But most important is probably this one where it can be patented as a new form. And since the competition in this generic space is continuously increasing over the years, then this last point is probably the most important now, because when we go for a API molecule screening at industrial level at the bench, so you have very few anhydrous possibilities. You have solvent possibilities, but many of them may not be acceptable or stable enough to carry forward with it. So it gives a viable option for these generic companies to patent it and then evaluate the form. So co-crystal, this research is on, has taken a new height because of this provision that it can be patented, and also it's the acceptance of the co-crystal definition, especially in the FDA 2018 guidelines. So crystal engineering can be used in many parts of this pharmaceutical co-crystals. I have only listed few here, and those are all related to the pure APIs. If you go to the formulation side, how to improve the formulation properties, there may be some more, but these are purely we can do straight away on the API molecule. Today I'll be concentrating on the 5 topics, which is one is related to methodology, the other one will be polymorphism, identification, design, and control. So I'll go to the main slides. So there is always a necessity of alternative techniques in this space, because if you look at the patents which have been published in last few years on these co-crystals, you will see that most of these things have been synthesized through slurry or the liquid or neat assisted grinding techniques using organic solvents. And the problem there is we have only few organic solvents which can be used for this purpose, because they are acceptable in the industry. So there is always a necessity to extend this part, because then we can actually manipulate and design co-crystals according to our needs. So in this context, I have mentioned the POLAG polymer assisted grinding technique, which had been introduced by the William Jones group here a few years ago. And there they mentioned that ethylene glycol polymers, depending on the chain lengths, co-crystals, it can be used in co-crystal formation. So what we thought, this work was done in Professor Meyerson's group. And what we thought here that ionic liquid also can be used for the same purpose. In a previous study, we had shown that ionic liquid can help in crystallization. Ionic liquid is there for many years, but its use in crystallization is limited mainly because of its viscosity and other factors, lack of evaporative part. So we thought that we can be used this ionic liquid assisted grinding technique here, mainly because that it also provides the same advantage which that polymer assisted grinding provided. In addition to that, ionic liquid can be controlled or can be tuned both by the chain length of the this cation and also by the electronic nature of it. So we mainly used this C2MIM based ionic liquids in this study because this had shown very good crystallization propensity in earlier studies, which I have also cited here. So we had chosen two systems basically. One is caffeine and citric acid system, and second was caffeine and glutaric acid system. The citric acid system is chosen because it is only formed through the liquid assisted grinding. And the second one, this caffeine glutaric acid system, their polymorphism occurs depending on the solvent system. So if we can use the ionic liquids and show the utility there in these two systems, it can be said with certain confidence that ionic liquid can be used in the grinding technique and it can be used to synthesize new co-crystals. So when we tried that, we in both caffeine citric acid and caffeine glutaric acid co-crystals, what we observed is form 1. And as we increase the chain length of these cations, what we observed that in caffeine C8 is formed. So it is highlighting the importance of the grinding liquid in the technique. So that means that ionic liquid participates as a grinding liquid in this process. And the second one, when we try to change the polarity of the hydrophobicity of the ionic liquid from this NTF2 based ionic liquids to the BF4 based ionic liquids, we could see that gradual formation of the form 2 instead of form 1. So you can changing the hydrophilicity or hydrophobicity of the ionic liquid, you can actually tune the polymorphic outcome. So that was a nice result, and it tells both the things that ionic liquids, nature of ionic liquids matter in this ionic liquid assisted grinding technique, and as well it is a valid liquid for liquid assisted grinding. So we thought to analyze further that why this form 1 of this glutaric acid and this form, the only form in that caffeine citric acid co-crystal showed similar tendency towards the ionic grinding ionic liquid solvents. And what we observed that there is slip lanes there. So and slip lanes, when you use the hydrophobic ionic liquids, slip lanes are mostly non-polar, so they stick to those planes, and it helps in that shows the similarity between the two. So by this study, we showed that ionic liquid can be used as a grinding solvent in addition to the polymers which have been used earlier. And it helps, I mean, this type of studies may help in extending the methodology than the status quo. Second part is polymorphism in co-crystals. So we have done this study in Professor Desiraju's lab. So polymorphism in co-crystal is a very interesting topic. So first, it was thought that co-crystal might actually be helpful to tune the polymorphism propensity in the original API molecules. But then studies came, and some of them showed in recent times that the propensity of polymorphism in co-crystals are similar, very similar to what is observed in native compounds. But there are other type of observations also, that where it has been shown by Professor Desiraju group itself, that when you go from the single component to bicomponent to the higher order co-crystals, the propensity of polymorphism reduces. So it is, I mean, if co-crystal can be used to tune polymorphism, it would be very, very helpful, especially from the API polymorphism perspective. but I think more studies are needed to this front. So here what we are going to discuss is this aspect of synthon polymorphism. So when co-crystals are formed, they're formed through synthons. And a study by Professor Zaorowka group in 2010 showed that among 38 co-crystal polymorphs, 35 are either packing or conformational polymorphs. That means the propensity of this formation of these synthon polymorphs are very rare. And we try to investigate that, why it is so. And so we had taken this hydroxybenzoic acid and bipyridine system. We obtained 4 forms, form 1, form 2, form 3, and form 4. And among these 4 forms, form 1 and form 2 are called synthon polymorphs because their composition in asymmetric unit are same. And so you can see here in the first case it forms acid-acid dimer and then pyridine OH synthon. And the second case, it forms the other way around. It forms the acid pyridine synthon, whereas the OH group interacts with the COH group of the other molecule. So we questioned ourselves that why does it happen? And when we are trying to investigate that the packing of these co-crystals, we saw that in the form 1 co-crystals, it is just the addition. You can explain the packing of the form 1 co-crystals by addition of the native structures of 2 compounds. And we also observed a very nice thing in the hot stage microscopy. When you try to heat it up, we saw the generation of form 1 crystals on the surface of form 2. So once again, I mean, this is one of the very basic thing we consider in crystal engineering, the dichotomy between packing and interactions. And that is what is driving the synthon polymorphism in these cases. So once we obtained those results, so we questioned ourselves that whether there is any possibility that this rarity of this synthon polymorphism is linked to the rarity of obtained single crystal, or all the dinitrogen bases can be used for the synthon polymorphs. So we adopted one technique, 4-step technique. The relevance of this technique could be multivariate. So Professor Nangia in the morning explained the necessity of the orthogonal techniques. He explained the role of XPS in determining the salt co-crystal continuum. And it's also acknowledged in FDA guidelines. And we thought that IR is a very good orthogonal techniques. And it is highly useful in where you don't get single crystals or there is a problem of using single crystals to analyze certain things. Also, this approach gives you an idea about the synthons in the powder mixtures. And right now, if we see the pharmaceutical space, both innovator and generic companies are talking about the machine learning. And this is exactly, I mean, we didn't do machine learning. We just tried to take set of compounds and try to analyze synthons there. But I always feel that this is a very good first step maybe to to start a machine learning activity on this type of molecules or APIs. So coming to the technique, so what we did, we first tried to identify synthon from a known group of compounds, and then we applied it to the synthons in the co-crystals. Then we tried to take many synthons in known polymorphs and co-crystals, and then try to identify some unknown co-crystals in the 4th stage. So here is a pictorial depiction of the possibilities which can happen in synthon polymorphs if you take a hydroxybenzoic acid and a bipyridine ring. And in this study, we also identified the IR marker bands in the 1st stage, and this is given in this tabular form, so you can take a look. So after identifying these marker bands in the 1st step, what we did, we took simple systems where we know the structures. Stage we had applied it to the unknown systems. So what we did, we tried to take bipyridine, this diethylene bipyridine and the 4-hydroxybenzoic acid, and we tried to analyze the IR spectra. We observed only C and D synthons. and that means that only this Y possibility is the reality. And then we try to determine the single crystal structure. We observe the same structure there. And even more interesting case happened in the next example, which is 4-hydroxybenzoic acid and quinoxaline. When we tried to make this powder, we observed all 4 synthons. And we thought it could be a mixture, but then to make more sense of this result, we did the single crystal analysis, and surprisingly, it's not a synthon polymer, but all 4 synthons were possible, did exist in the same crystal structure. So this provides a very good method of analyzing synthons in powder mixture, because many cases, because API molecules are big, sometimes there are some problems in growing single crystals as well. So this method can be proven very useful in understanding what is happening in the powder mixture at the synthon level, and accordingly coin the design strategy for for the acceptable co-crystal in the pharmaceutical space. So the next example is about design of co-crystals. So we all have, whoever does crystal engineering, everybody knows about the supramolecular synthon concept introduced by Professor Desiraju in 1995. So this is a higher level synthon we are talking about. So it comes in the LSAM, we call it LSAM, and it's a Aufbau module. We all know Aufbau principle, it's a building up principle. So AI Kitaiguchi said that crystal structure can be analyzed using Aufbau principle, which means that you take a molecule, form a chain, then from chains you make a layer, and then you stack the layer and make the 3D structure. What Professor Desiraju introduced in this concept is that you take the synthon connection here, and you analyze, instead of just geometrical packing, you bring the synthon into the question, and you, depending on the synthon strength, you can analyze the structure. Now at analysis level, it is very easy sometimes to find synthons and also LSAMs, but when you try to go and try to design it, it's sometimes difficult. But it has huge importance in the pharmaceutical co-crystal context, because sometimes most of the approaches in predicting or designing co-crystal in industrial space now is dependent either on the computational front, which is not very successful on all the APIs, or it is based on synthons, which is more successful, I'd say, than the computational techniques. And if you introduce this LSAM concept in the pharmaceutical space, so it will only give you more control over the whole organization of the molecules within a crystal. And there is another part of it that I'll come later in this talk, that this study also will tell us that it is sometimes possible to tune the synthonic structures in the solution, and therefore sometimes if you are getting something which is not so desirable, you can tune the solvent composition, solution composition, and can get a desired crystal structure out. So the importance of LSAM in terms of crystallization pathway is that they appear at the end stages of nucleation or crystallization, and they offer you a way to design structures in a modular fashion. So what we did in this study is that we designed this long-range synthons Aufbau modules, and based on hydrogen bonding and pi-pi stacking. As I said, that it is sometimes easy to find LSAM in crystal structure, but it's very difficult to design, because what you have to avoid here is synthon competition. For that, you have to take two synthons which are not so comparable in energy, and also they are in different direction. So hydrogen bonding and this pi-pi stacking, we got this idea from the modularity concept, that we observe many structures with this tetrameric hydrogen bond in the aminophenol family. And there is also a propensity of this pi-pi stacking in 1,2,3 trichlorobenzene or 3,4,5 trichlorophenol. So we combined these two aspects in this series of crystal structures, and we obtained crystal structures with controllable dimensions. So here I have shown, I'll just use the pointer. Yeah, so this is the tetramer I'm talking about. And this is the stacking which happens between this trichloromoiety. And that gives you the controllable cell dimension. So basically, because if you take this length and width, it is controlling the A and B axis. So basically, whatever you synthesize co-crystals, all will be in the same range of A and B axis. So it gives you that sort of control in designing crystal structure. And then when we tried to see the synthons, I mean, these are all the type of synthons. We got 14 to 15 structures in this whole series. And some of the things I have shown here, which shows that how these synthons are packed and then how LSAMs are packed, and also how can this LSAM be connected together to get predictability in all 3 dimensions. And it is showing here that even suppose if you use very controllable and very, I would say, a series of molecules which belong to the same family, say halogens. So here, by using that, you can also control C axis of this whole crystal structure. So in all these 3 cases, one is chlorine, chloroamine, I think, one is chloroaniline and chlorobrominated aniline and iodinated aniline. And it is also, and so whenever we test any robustness of synthons, we also test how transferable they are. So we try to see whether these are transferable to other trichlorophenols, and we found it also works in 2,3,4 trichlorophenols family. We also tried to check the robustness of these tetramers. So what we did, we tried to use co-crystallization with 3-aminobenzoamide and 4-hydroxybenzoic acid, and 3-aminobenzoamide and 3-hydroxybenzoic acid. The purpose was just to see whether in the influence of more stronger these acid amide synthons, this which NH, this aminophenol recognition breaks, but it didn't break. Instead, we observed in some cases that acid-acid dimer forms, even though there is a possibility of formation of acid amide, and that means this tetramer is driving the primary synthon of these co-crystals. So by looking at this persistent nature of these tetramers, what he thought that it may be possible that these tetramers are observed, these LSAMs are observed in solution. So we did this study in collaboration with the Professor S.P. Sharma group in IISc Bangalore. And we showed, this is first from, if you start from the left, this is the 1D NMR study. Where we are going from A is the highest concentration of this molecule. We have taken the 3,5 dichloroaniline with 3,4,5 trichlorophenol co-crystal structure as a model compound for this study. And we are going from A to F in dilution. And when we go in there, we see suddenly downfield shift of this proton. So it is indicating to us that probably stacking is breaking at that point. Then we pursued this NOA study where you saturated one of the protons of this aniline and tried to see that proximity of this trichlorophenol group. And again, we had taken 3 points here, A, E, and F. You can see here that hydrogen bonding is also maintained in all these 3 steps. So these two together tells us that LSAM is there in the solution. In addition to that, Professor Sharma group performed some advanced NMR techniques, including translational diffusion coefficients and T1 experiments. So both of these tell us that if the molecular size in the T1 constant increases when molecular size decreases because of the rotational freedom it offers. And translational diffusion coefficient is also inversely proportional to the radius of the molecule. So if you go through the trend of AEF, you'll see that both these cases, these things are maintained, that at highest dilution, that is at F, the stacking is breaking, but the hydrogen bonding is still intact. So it tells us, and for a benchmark, we used trichlorophenol also, just to see that our results are consistent. And this all NMR studies, along with the crystallographic studies that we performed, it tells us that LSAMs are possible in solution. And that gives huge scope to the pharmaceutical co-crystal design, because then you can actually go to the solution and you can change the solvent nature or the solute nature slightly and get the co-crystal. pharmaceutical relevant. So this is another aspect of co-crystallization, which I think is important in pharmaceutical industry. We are always talking about this, how relevant is pharmaceutical co-crystals as a product and what is its stability and permeability and solubility. But it can offer a unique advantage of impurity separation. So whenever you have many times we have seen in industry and in my experience as well, that there are impurities which are difficult to separate through synthetic techniques. And when we tried co-crystallization on those compounds, the purity of the compound improved significantly, and which could not be achieved through any synthetic procedure. So impurity separation could be an application of this topic, which I'm going to talk about. So you have very similar molecules, structurally similar molecules, and then if one is target and the other one is impurity. Many times it happens that impurity incorporates into your crystal structure because during crystallization it doesn't discriminate between the two molecules. It's so similar. So co-crystallization can be a way there to discriminate between these two. And also because many compounds, many of these APIs are big molecules with multiple conformational flexibility as well as multiple functional groups. So these small similarities or the small differences, if you can identify and differentiate through the co-crystal formation, those can be used to produce alternative co-crystal forms, which can be patentable and can be a way to enter the market. So here what we have taken as a model compound is orcinol, which has degrees of freedom according in this Wedge functional group. So it's a resorcinol, 5-methyl resorcinol, and you can see this tau 1, tau 2, and there are 3 possibilities of conformational polymorphs. And if you can see the energy scan here, A, B, C, and the differences are very small, but there is a certain difference in these conformational energies. So what we try to look at that whether this we can we can discriminate these conformers through co-crystallization. Also, we obtained these polymorphs of orcinol, where form 1 was a jet 1 prime 1 structure, but form 2 was jet prime 8 structure, where 8 different molecules with 8 molecules with different conformations are incorporated in the asymmetric unit. So that also tells us that this could be a suitable system to study this problem. And when we try to co-crystallize it with different types of mostly pyridine based, but there is still diversity in the choice of co-formers. We saw that in many cases we found very specific, what should I say, the binding between the particular conformer of orcinol and the co-former. So it again illustrates that co-formers or this co-crystallization can be used as a separation technique of impurity and target compounds, as well as different conformers which are possible in the API molecules. So this is the last part I'll talk about. So through this study, we also obtained one co-crystal, bipyridine co-crystals, and we used shape and size similar molecules to replace that to get ternary co-crystals. Now the question in this case is that is it really possible or really feasible in the pharmaceutical space? So now recently one paper from Professor Nangia group has come, where they have shown this possibility of ternary co-crystals using pharmaceutically relevant molecules. And if you have attended the last few papers of Professor Desiraju in molecular pharmaceutics, or if you have attended his talk in Bradford, you'll see that he advocated for inclusion of this co-crystallization in manufacturing stage rather than at the formulation stage. So if that becomes a possibility, then I think these higher order co-crystals will be more prominent in pharmaceutical space. So to conclude, alternative methods are welcome in terms of preparation of co-crystals. Polymorphism can be an important aspect in co-crystals, and synthon polymorphism provides an insight into the dichotomy of chemical and geometrical factors of crystal packing. Orthogonal methods are going to be important in crystal engineering, and it is going to be very important in the pharmaceutical space as well, because getting a single crystal is often difficult for the API molecules. And co-crystals can be designed better, I would say, by the LSAM concept. And co-crystals can also be tuned through tuning solute-solvent interactions. And higher order co-crystals may provide more flexibility in co-crystal design, and we may see more of these examples in near future. So to finish, I would like to acknowledge my supervisors, Professor Desiraju, who is in this meeting, and Professor D. Fetter from KU Leuven, Professor Alan Meyerson from MIT, and I have shown most of the works from Professor Desiraju lab and Professor Meyerson lab here. I also would like to thank Dr. Reddy's laboratories to give me the opportunity to work there for 2 years, because I don't think I would have appreciated these subtle issues which pharmaceutical industry faces unless I joined there. And I also thank BITS Pilani Hyderabad for giving me this opportunity and providing the research facilities. So we are a new group in BITS Pilani Hyderabad. So if you want to pursue research in these areas, or you want to collaborate, please feel free to write to me. Thank you.